Hi, this is a tutorial for Stage 1 of Project 5 in the Against the Clock textbook, the Music Festival CSS site. So you can turn to the Project 5 in your text if you want to follow along. In this chapter, we will be working with classes, using class selectors to place background images, and making editable attributes using a template. We'll apply multiple classes to elements using code, and also use the iframe feature to insert another HTML page onto a current web page. We'll also create a form using CSS, which is one of the requirements for your homework assignment. The Solar Homework Assignment 10, you will also create a web page with a form on it. So let's begin by setting up our site here. In Dreamweaver, I'm going to go to Manage Sites and create a new site called Voices, and I'm going to browse to my WIP folder on my desktop, and I have downloaded the folder from Against the Clock labeled Voices, and I'm going to choose that as my root folder. Save, click Done, and then you can see all my files here. Now I have the completed site that I'm going to bring up just to show you what it's going to look like. I'm going to switch to live view. This is our home page, and then we've got a page that we're going to create an iframe and insert into another page, into this page, and then we've got a sign up page with our form on it. So that's what we're going to end up with at the end of the tutorial. I'm going to close that folder, and then we're going to go ahead and begin in Stage 1. We're going to begin by opening the Templates folder. So whenever you create a template, it's always going to automatically create a Templates folder, and you don't want to move that around. So we're going to double click on this design template file. I'm in split view, and I'm going to switch to design view so that we can see the code along with the design of our page. A CSS file already is attached, so we can see in our CSS designer panel there is a CSS style sheet with the selectors. Remember that a class can be added or applied multiple times throughout a site or throughout a page, whereas then the ID selector can only be applied once. So we're going to use different HTML tags on the same page and apply various class selectors. So with the template page open in design view, go to our CSS panel and select all. Select the style.css sheet, and then click the add selector button that looks like a plus sign. And we're going to add, it automatically adds the selector at the very bottom of our panel, and so we're going to call it .bkg FAQs. And we added that dot in front of it so that it recognizes it as a class selector. And hit return. Uncheck show set if it is checked. And then we're going to define some options for this selector that we just created. So we're going to scroll down. I'm going to select background first and scroll to the background image and go to the Browse To folder. In my Voices folder, I'm going to go to the Images folder and then Backgrounds folder and select that back FAQs image. Click Open, and then I'm going to go to the background size and select Cover so that the image covers the entire background. Now I'm going to click inside my main content frame here in this box, and I'm going to use the tag selector down here in the lower left portion to select the section image container element. So if I click on section, it will include all the selectors within that section. I'm going to go to my properties panel that I have opened here, and then open the class menu and select that class selector that I just created, the background or BKG FAQs. And now you can see the background image showing up in that section. Go ahead and save your template file, and you can see the asterisk is showing that it hasn't been saved, and update all your links. Now I'm going to click the Style CSS sheet and then save that. With the Style CSS sheet selected, we can look at the code for the style sheet and scroll to the very bottom of the code, and we're going to look at the class selector that we just created here in the code view. So here we have the name of the class selector, BKG FAQs, and then we've got a property here, the background image property, and then the attribute of that property shows us, and if you hover over it, it shows you what the image looks like. So we've added this image to that background, so that's the attribute of this property. And then for the background size property, we've added the attribute of cover so that that image covers the background. We're going to click on this line 187, where that class selector starts, and drag down to include that closing bracket, and copy it by going to Command C or Edit Copy, and then go to the next blank line and just do a Command V or Edit Paste to paste that code. So we're just duplicating the code for that class selector, and then we're going to create another class selector. This time we're going to rename this selector that we just duplicated BKG Food. Now it's still a class selector, so it still has the dot in front of it. And then under background image, we want to change that image this time. So I'm going to select this entire URL and delete it, and then type in U, and then your code hint will show you the URL text, and you can hit return and then click on browse to your images folder, and then backgrounds, and select the back food image. So the code hints is really helpful because then you don't have to know all of the code, and then if you can select, for example, just type in the first letter or two of the code that you want to start, then Dreamweaver will finish out that code for you. So we're going to keep the background size covered, then we're going to do the same thing on the next. I'm going to hit a return to create another blank line and copy and paste, or paste, since I've already copied that code for the class selector, and this time I'm going to type in another class selector name, and I'm going to call it BKG Schedule. And I'm going to do the same thing and delete that URL and type in U, hit return for the code hint, and click on browse. And this time I'm going to select the back schedule image, and then I'm going to do the same thing, hit return, paste, create another class selector, and I'm going to call this one Sign Up, and I'm going to select the mailing image. You can go ahead and save the CSS file or do a save all, and then we're going to go to the template and make an editable region. So in a template, everything's going to be locked down unless we make it an editable region where you can make changes. So I'm in split view in the design view, and I'm going to click the section tag to select that image container. So when I select that whole container, we can see that yellow outline, and we're going to make that section editable. So I'm going to go to Tools, Templates, Make Attribute Editable. And then you want to select the class attribute, check Make Attribute Editable, select the class label and the type text, and then the default is the BKG FAQs, that first class selector that we created, and then click on OK, and then save the template file and update all the files based on that template. Now I'm going to go back to our Files panel and open the FAQs HTML page. I'm going to switch to Live View. Now you can see the background is in that FAQ page, and it's also on the Food HTML page, but we want to create that different background image to cover the background of the food page. So we can go to Edit, Template Properties, and change the class to background food. And click on OK, and it should change the background image. If you don't see it showing up, I'm going to go to the background food class selector and select the background and go to the browse to background image and just select that image here, and then make sure that you go ahead and select under background size cover. And so you can do that on all the subsequent HTML pages with their accompanying background image. I'm going to go back to my Files panel and open the Schedule image, HTML page and the Sign Up page, and then go ahead and add the background image to those pages. So I've gone ahead and added the background to the Schedule and the Sign Up pages, and I've used my properties and made sure that the background is on cover. And then I'm going to go back to my food HTML page and format this page further. Make sure your live view is on, and then you can scroll through the page and take a look at some of the formatting. So we've got this article tag with a 2-column class selector. We've got these image tags for each image. We have paragraph tags, and it's within this section tag. So keep in mind that as we're going to scale or resize some of these images, that it's always best practice to resize them first in Photoshop, because then you're not uploading files that are larger than necessary, and that will slow down the load time for your site. So that's always best if you can scale it down first in Photoshop. So what we're going to do here is we're going to scale things down in Dreamweaver, and then we want to make sure that we resample it so that we're not uploading larger than needed files. And then you always want to keep the original size on your drive or your thumb drive or Google Drive or shared drive somewhere, so you have that as a backup. But you don't want to upload those large files to the server if you don't need them. Now we're going to go to our CSS Designer panel and create a new class. So I'm going to go to Add a Selector, and I'm going to call this .img150px. So you want to be kind of specific in your naming of these selectors so that you know exactly what they do. So this selector is to resize our images to 150 pixels. And then once you create that, we're going to use our Find and Replace menu here. Go to Find and Replace in Files and click on the Advanced button. We're going to find in the current document, and we're going to look for it in IMG or image tag. We're going to go to the Action menu to Set Attribute and then type in Class, and then select the image 150px class selector that we just created, and then go to Replace All. So we're going to click on OK, and we're going to look at all the image tags, and then I forgot to add my properties to that tag, so I can go back now, select that IMG 150px class selector, and add our properties to it. So you can go to Width, under Layout, and we're going to select Pixels, get 150 pixels in width, and then the height is also 150 pixels. Then we're going to scroll down and give it a left margin of 0 to make sure you're in margin and not padding, and then a right margin of 10. And then we're going to scroll all the way down here. Now I'm just going to add a float property and float it to the left. And you can click on Show Set to see all the properties now that we've just added to that selector. And then you can see these images take on those properties. After you looked at all the replacements in that Find and Replace panel, we can go ahead and close that tab. And you can go to a File Save All. And now we're going to apply multiple classes to the elements on this page. So we're still in food.html, we're in Live View, We've got our style CSS, so I'm going to click on the style sheet here. So we'll make sure that you select the style sheet rather than the source code, and then we're going to go and scroll down in the code pane. So then in the first empty line, I'm going to type in a class selector here, img, and then float right with the curly bracket, and then press return. And then the Dreamweaver will automatically insert the closing curly bracket. Then I'm going to type in FLO, and you can see the code hint, and we can select float is at the top of the list, and just hit return. And we're going to float it to the right, so I'm going to hit the down arrow to select right, and then return, and then type a semicolon at the end. Now we can go to our live view, and we can add that selector. So that's just another way you can type it directly into the code, or you can use your designer panel, CSS designer panel, and add it there. Now you can see it automatically adds that float right class selector here in our CSS designer panel. So then we're going to select the image under this New York style deli, this image right here. So remember, all these images already have the image, the 150 pixel class selector attributed to it. And we're going to add that float right selector. So you can click on this plus sign and just add it here by typing in .float right, and then got that option here, you can just select it. And so now it's got two class selectors because we can add multiple class selectors to one element. So we have the 150 pixel class selector and the float right. So now this image is floating to the right. So that just means that anything is going to wrap around the left of it. Now we can add that float right class selector to this image next to it for the Southern Fried Comfort image. All right, again, don't forget to save, but we're going to go ahead and move on now and insert our iframe. And we're going to go to our schedule HTML page. So we're switching web pages here. And we're going to add an iframe here. So an iframe simply is another web page that we can place inside of this current web page. So select the paragraph after the header. And I'm in Live View. You can select the P tag for paragraph. And then we're going to go to the Insert menu, go to the HTML Insert option, and then select the iframe button. I'm going to scroll all the way down here, and I'm going to just click on iframe, and this time I'm going to select after. So we want this iframe element to be inserted after this paragraph element. So here you can see it's inserted after the paragraph. And then we can look at the code. It's added that iframe code here. Place your cursor right before that closing tag after the first iframe tag, and hit a space and SRC, and then there's the code hint. I can just select SRC and hit return. And now I'm going to hit the down arrow and select Performers HTML. So that's what you have available in the root directory. So we're going to select this HTML page to insert as part of the iframe. So I'm going to hit return, and now you can see that content from the Performers page, if I go to my Files menu, I can see that Performers HTML page there is inserted into this page. I can further format this by using the CSS Designer panel and create a new tag selector called iframe. Just hit return and hit return again, and then I can uncheck show set and add some properties to it. So I'm going to go to width, select pixels, and type in 750 for the width of the box. And then for height, I'm going to type in 350 pixels. And then for borders, I'm going to select the border property and just select 0 pixels. And then I can click on Show Set and just look over all the properties that I've added to that selector. Now I'm going to go back to the Files panel and open the Performers HTML page. So this is the content, the page that we just inserted as an iframe. We want to further format this page using CSS. but we're not going to use the same CSS page. So we're going to add a different CSS style sheet. So you can have more than one CSS style sheet to a website. So I'm going to go to CSS Designer and click on Add Sources and attach an existing CSS style sheet as a link. I'm going to browse to my root directory folder, click on the CSS folder and select the Style Performer CSS sheet. And go ahead and click on OK, and now you can see that it's formatted to that style sheet. Go ahead and save that file, and then you can close it. And then we can go back to our Schedule HTML page. And since we've made an update to that iframe, I'm going to switch back to Design View and then back to Live View, and now you'll see that updated formatting in the iframe. We can go ahead and save all of our files. And that concludes stage 1, and we'll go on to stage 2.